When I bought my first house, it felt like a dream come true. A quaint little home in a quiet neighborhood, with plenty of space and a charming, albeit old-fashioned, design. The only thing I didn't like was the basement. It had a dark, musty atmosphere, and something about it just felt off. Despite my unease, I rarely thought about the basement. I stored a few boxes down there and left it alone. But one night, I heard strange noises coming from below. It sounded like faint whispers and shuffling feet. Convinced it was just my imagination, I brushed it off and went to bed. The following nights, the noises grew louder and more persistent. It was always the same whispers that seemed to echo through the walls and a soft, rhythmic tapping. I decided it was time to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, I descended the creaky wooden stairs. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of damp earth filled my nostrils. I swept the light across the room, revealing old furniture and cobwebs, but nothing unusual. As I turned to leave, I noticed a small door in the corner, almost hidden behind a stack of boxes. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached the door. It was old and weathered, with a rusty lock that crumbled in my hand. I hesitated for a moment, then pulled the door open. A narrow, stone staircase led down into darkness. Every instinct told me to turn back, but something compelled me to continue. I carefully made my way down the stairs, my flashlight flickering as I descended. The air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder, as if urging me to turn back. But I pressed on. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a small, circular room. The walls were lined with strange symbols and old, rotting books. In the center of the room was a stone altar, covered in dust and cobwebs. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized this place was not meant to be disturbed. As I examined the altar, I noticed a small, ornate box. It looked out of place among the decaying surroundings. I reached for it, my hands trembling. The moment I touched it, the whispers stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and I felt an icy hand on my shoulder. I spun around, my flashlight revealing a shadowy figure standing just inches away. Its eyes were hollow, and its face twisted into a grotesque grin. I tried to move, but my body was frozen with fear. The figure raised a hand and pointed to the box. Its mouth opened, and a low, guttural voice echoed through the room. "Release us." Desperate to escape, I fumbled with the box, my hands shaking. I finally managed to open it, revealing a collection of old, yellowed photographs and a piece of parchment. The photos showed the same basement, but with a group of people dressed in old-fashioned clothing. They looked like they were performing some kind of ritual. The parchment contained a series of incantations and a warning: "Do not disturb the resting spirits." I dropped the box and ran up the stairs, the shadowy figure's laughter echoing in my ears. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. Since that night, the noises have stopped, but the memory of the basement haunts me. I've considered moving, but something keeps me here, a lingering sense of unfinished business. I can't explain what happened, but I know one thing for certain: some secrets are better left buried. I don't know why I agreed to house sit for my sister, Amanda. Her Victorian-style home had always unsettled me, especially the basement. She used it as storage for old furniture and random antiques she picked up at estate sales. Every time I visited, I avoided going down there. Something about the stale air and the feeling of being watched kept me on edge. She laughed when I told her. "You've been watching too many horror movies," she teased, handing me the keys before leaving for her week-long vacation. "Just feed the cat, water the plants, and don't go snooping in the basement unless you want to scare yourself." The first few nights were uneventful. The house creaked and groaned like old houses do, but nothing unusual. On the third night, though, I heard something that froze me in place. It started as a faint tapping noise coming from below. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was the heating pipes or maybe the cat batting something around. But when I went to check, the cat was asleep on the couch beside me. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate. It was coming from the basement. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a draft or an old appliance acting up. But my curiosity got the better of me. Grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, I approached the basement door. The air was thick as I opened it, like stepping into a different world. I stood at the top of the stairs, shining my flashlight down into the darkness. The beam barely reached the bottom. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. The tapping stopped. I waited, straining to hear anything else. Then, a faint whisper reached my ears. It was so quiet I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But it came again. Soft, unintelligible words carried on a cold draft that seemed to snake up the stairs and wrap around me. I should have turned around. I should have closed the door and pretended I never heard anything. But something compelled me to go down. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound amplified in the oppressive silence. When I reached the bottom, I scanned the room with my flashlight. Dust motes danced in the beam, but nothing seemed out of place. And then I saw it, a wooden chest pushed against the far wall. It hadn't been there before. My heart pounded as I approached it. The whispers grew louder, though I still couldn't make out the words. They weren't coming from the chest, but the air around me seemed alive with them. The chest was old, its wood dark and splintered. The metal hinges were rusted, and a heavy padlock secured the lid. I don't know why I reached out to touch it, but the moment my fingers brushed the surface, the whispers stopped. Silence. Then, the basement door slammed shut. I spun around, the flashlight shaking in my hand. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer. I ran up the stairs, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt like someone was holding it shut from the other side. Panic set in as I pounded on the door, screaming for help. Behind me, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. They sounded angry now. I turned to face the darkness, my flashlight flickering. Shadows shifted along the walls, moving toward me. My breathing grew shallow as the air grew colder. And then I saw them, faces emerging from the darkness. Their hollow eyes locked onto me. They were translucent, barely there, but their expressions were twisted with rage and anguish. One of them pointed at the chest. "I don't understand," I cried, backing up against the door. The whispering became deafening, a cacophony of voices overlapping and blending together. The chest began to shake, its lid rattling against the padlock. The lock snapped. The lid creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. And yet, it felt like the room was being pulled toward it, like the chest was a black hole sucking in everything around it. The faces turned toward me, their mouths opening wide in silent screams. I felt a force tugging at me, pulling me toward the chest. I clawed at the door, screaming, but it was no use. Just as I felt myself slipping, the basement door flew open. I tumbled out onto the floor, gasping for air. The whispers stopped. When I looked back, the basement was silent and still. The chest was gone. I didn't stay another night. I called Amanda and made up an excuse about an emergency at work. I haven't told her what happened. I don't think she'd believe me. But every now and then, when I'm alone at night, I hear faint whispers, like they're calling me back. And I know the chest is still out there, waiting for someone else to find it.